Citizenship on the Go. Lesson 1. American History, the Colonial Period, and Independence. Part 2. The Declaration of Independence. By the end of the colonial period, the British Empire, the French Empire, and the Spanish Empire had colonies all along the east coast of North America, next to the Atlantic Ocean. 13 of the British colonies were to become the 13 original states of the United States of America. After July 4th, 1776, when representatives of each of the 13 colonies signed the Declaration of Independence, announcing that they were no longer a part of the British Empire, they officially became the first 13 states. The flag of the United States has 13 stripes to represent the 13 original colonies that together adopted the Declaration of Independence. An early version of the U.S. flag also had 13 stars, but the flag today looks different. There are 50 stars on the flag today because the United States expanded over time to have 50 states. The modern U.S. flag still has only 13 stripes, though, to remind us of the 13 original states that started it all. Each of the colonies that became the 13 original states were on the east coast of America, next to the Atlantic Ocean. From north to south, the 13 original states were New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. Civics test question. There were 13 original states. Name 3. There were 13 original states. Name 3. Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. 3 of the 13 original states were Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. The 13 original states also included New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. Civics test question. What ocean is on the east coast of the United States? What ocean is on the east coast of the United States? The Atlantic. The Atlantic Ocean is on the east coast of the United States. The 13 original states were all next to the Atlantic Ocean. Civics test question. Why does the flag have 13 stripes? Why does the flag have 13 stripes? Because there were 13 original colonies. The U.S. flag has 13 stripes to represent the 13 original colonies. Civics test question. Why does the flag have 50 stars? Why does the flag have 50 stars? Because there are 50 states. The U.S. flag has 50 stars because each star represents a state. During the colonial period, Great Britain was ruled by a king and a parliament. King George III was the nation's hereditary ruler. He was not elected. Instead, he inherited his power from his parents. Britain also had a parliament, somewhat similar to the modern U.S. Congress, but few British citizens and no American colonists had representation in Parliament. Even though the king and his parliament made many laws that colonists had to follow, colonists did not get to vote for anyone in government. This lack of representation would become one of the biggest reasons Americans would declare independence from Great Britain. In the 1600s and 1700s, there were a series of wars between Great Britain and France. The British and French militaries fought each other both in Europe and in North America. These wars cost the British government a lot of money. To help maintain the British military, Great Britain increased taxes on colonists. However, since the American colonists had no representation in Parliament, they complained that this was taxation without representation and therefore unfair. The colonists wanted self-government. They wanted to have a say in who made the laws that applied to them and in who would protect their basic rights. When a tax was placed on British tea in 1773, many colonists stopped buying British tea. Later that year, some colonists in Massachusetts protested by throwing 3 boatloads of tea into Boston Harbor. You may notice in this illustration that some of the protesters were dressed up in costumes that were meant to make it look as if they were Native Americans. The protesters weren't really Native Americans, however. They were wearing these disguises to hide their true identities from British law enforcement and to symbolize their feeling of disconnection with the British Empire. Many colonists at the time felt as if they were more American than British, and dressing up in costumes based on European stereotypes of American Indian people was a way some chose to show that. The Massachusetts protest at which colonists dumped loads of British tea into the water is now known as the Boston Tea Party. After the Boston Tea Party, relations between the colonists and Great Britain continued to worsen. The next year, the British Parliament put Massachusetts under direct British control and allowed British troops to stay for free in privately owned houses. Colonists were required by law to provide members of the British Navy and Army with food and other supplies. This was called quartering, or boarding. Some colonists violently resisted quartering and became enemies of the British government and the British military in the process. Protests continued, and in 1775, the British military clashed with angry colonists in 2 towns outside of Boston. The Revolutionary War had begun. At this time, Great Britain had the largest army and navy in the world. The 13 colonies, on the other hand, had no navy and only part-time militias. George Washington had been a major in the British Army during the French and Indian War, but he came to support the colonial movement for independence from the British Empire because of his disgust for taxation without representation and for other demands the British government made of the colonists. In 1775, Washington was chosen to build and command a national American army. Gathering and training an army was a very difficult task, but Washington proved a determined, resourceful, and inspirational commander. Alongside important allies like the French military officer Lafayette, Washington helped lead the forces of the 13 colonies to victory in the Revolutionary War. Civics test question. Why did the colonists fight the British? Why did the colonists fight the British? Because of taxation without representation. The colonists fought the British because they were required to pay high taxes, even though they didn't have self-government. The colonists also fought the British because of boarding, or quartering. At a meeting of representatives from the 13 colonies, it was decided that all 13 would permanently break away from the British Empire. Officially, they would not recognize the authority of the British king or his government anymore. A representative of the colony of Virginia, Thomas Jefferson, wrote a letter to the British government announcing that the colonies did not consider themselves part of the British Empire any longer. The letter Jefferson wrote is called the Declaration of Independence. It said the United States is free from Great Britain. On July 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was adopted by the colonial government. The Declaration of Independence was signed by representatives of all 13 colonies. Because they had announced that they weren't a part of the British Empire anymore. Later in 1776, Connecticut, Maryland, Georgia, and the other 10 original colonies stopped calling themselves colonies. Now they were states. Together, they formed the United States of America. Many people consider July 4th, 1776, to be the birthday of the USA. We celebrate a national U.S. holiday, Independence Day, every year on the 4th of July. Civics test question. When was the Declaration of Independence adopted? When was the Declaration of Independence adopted? July 4th, 1776. The Declaration of Independence was adopted by representatives of the 13 original colonies on the 4th of July in the year 1776. Civics test question. What did the Declaration of Independence do? What did the Declaration of Independence do? Announced our independence from Great Britain. When the Founding Fathers declared our independence on July 4th, 1776, by adopting the Declaration of Independence, they were sending a message to the world that said the United States is free from Great Britain. Civics test question. When do we celebrate Independence Day? When do we celebrate Independence Day? July 4th. Every year, we celebrate Independence Day on the 4th of July. Although many colonial representatives signed the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson wrote most of this important announcement on his own. The introduction Jefferson wrote to the Declaration of Independence claims that it's an obvious fact that all men are created equal. It says that everyone is born with the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Declaration of Independence by Thomas Jefferson reads in part,
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
The Declaration goes on to list 27 complaints colonists had against King George and his Parliament, including quartering or boarding. It details how people in the 13 colonies were denied many rights, including the right to self-government. It says that since the British king did not protect colonists' rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the colonists have taken action to protect themselves. Civics test question. What are two rights in the Declaration of Independence? What are two rights in the Declaration of Independence? Life and liberty. The Declaration of Independence states that everyone has the right to life, to liberty, and to the pursuit of happiness. It says that the government should protect people's rights, not take them away. As the principal writer of the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson is considered one of the United States' founding fathers. Some other people who reviewed and signed the Declaration of Independence and who helped set up the U.S. government, such as John Adams and Benjamin Franklin, are also referred to as founding fathers. After the Revolutionary War, John Adams became the first vice president of the USA, working alongside the nation's first president, George Washington. Later, when Washington stepped down from the presidency after 2 terms in office, John Adams was elected the second president of the USA. After Adams, Thomas Jefferson was voted in as the third president of the United States. Jefferson is considered a founding father not only because he wrote the Declaration of Independence, but also because he contributed to the country's development as its third president. Benjamin Franklin was never president of the United States, but he did many other notable things that earned him the name of founding father alongside Adams, Jefferson, and other key figures of early U.S. history. Civics test question. Who wrote the Declaration of Independence? Who wrote the Declaration of Independence? Jefferson. The Declaration of Independence was written mostly by Thomas Jefferson. In 1776, the same year the Declaration of Independence was adopted by the 13 colonies, a young scholar originally from the Hartford, Connecticut area named Lemuel Haynes wrote a sermon in response to the announcement that the United States was free from Great Britain. Though he was born in Connecticut, Haynes had been raised in Massachusetts, where many protests took place in the 1700s against taxation without representation and other acts of the British government. Haynes agreed that the colonies should have self-government, but he said it was hypocritical to fight for the freedom of one group of people while enslaving another. Haynes' father was black and his mother was white. He took the position that if all men are created equal, as Jefferson had written, then life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are rights everyone has by nature, regardless of race. Here's one part of what Haynes wrote in 1776 in response to the Declaration of Independence.
Liberty is equally as precious to a black man as it is to a white one, and bondage equally as intolerable to the one as it is to the other. Shall a man's color be the decisive criterion whereby to judge of his natural right? To be consistent, you must let the oppressed go free.
Lemuel Haynes was not alone in calling for slavery to be abolished during the time the colonies were fighting for independence from Britain, but it would be nearly 100 more years before slavery was made illegal in the United States. As a young man, Benjamin Franklin had people working in slavery for him, but as he grew older, he came to believe that abolitionists like Haynes were correct. Slavery should be illegal. Franklin tried to convince other founding fathers to outlaw slavery in the United States, but failed, even though he had a great influence on the early USA in other ways. Franklin was a U.S. diplomat and spent several years in France, raising foreign support for the American independence movement. His diplomatic skills helped convince the French government to officially recognize the United States as a country. Benjamin Franklin was also the first Postmaster General of the United States and the oldest member of the Constitutional Convention, a series of meetings at which the supreme law of the land, the Constitution, was written. Other founding fathers looked up to Franklin because of his long experience and many achievements. Franklin's influence on the early United States didn't end there. He also started the first free libraries and published a popular journal called Poor Richard's Almanac. Poor Richard's Almanac was a mix of practical information such as weather forecasts and household tips, alongside amusing stories, poems, puzzles, and proverbs. You may recognize some famous Benjamin Franklin quotes that were published in Poor Richard's Almanac, like, "Early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise." As a writer, illustrator, and publisher, Benjamin Franklin convinced many Americans of the need for unity among the 13 colonies. This drawing is one of the first political cartoons to appear in an American newspaper. Franklin drew it more than 20 years before the Declaration of Independence to urge the colonies to form one government for defense and other general important purposes. The cartoon was used again later during the Revolutionary War to promote the same idea. In the cartoon, Franklin published, SC stands for South Carolina, NC for North Carolina, V for Virginia, M for Maryland, P for Pennsylvania, and NJ for New Jersey. NY stands for New York. The head of the snake is labeled NE for New England. In Franklin's day, New England was a name commonly used to refer to the colonies, later states, of Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island. Just 2 of the 13 original colonies are missing from this picture, Georgia and Delaware. Franklin knew that the 13 original states could beat the powerful military of the British Empire only by working together. Unity was not always easy to achieve, but by fighting together during the Revolutionary War, the states began to see themselves as members of a single united nation instead of as separate states. Civics test question. What is one thing Benjamin Franklin is famous for? What is one thing Benjamin Franklin is famous for? He was a U.S. diplomat. Franklin is famous for many reasons. One way he contributed to early U.S. history was through his work as a diplomat, representing the United States abroad in France and in other countries, forging diplomatic connections between the United States and nations overseas. Franklin was also the oldest member of the Constitutional Convention, and he served as the country's first Postmaster General. He was the writer of Poor Richard's Almanac, and he started the first free libraries in the United States.